Hi everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay or Jaylan Salah, as you formerly know her, film critic at Geek Vibes Nation and In Session Film. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Florence Hunt and Rory Walton-Smith on their TV series Mixtape, a very lovely romantic, like drama that centers about music. Florence and Rory, I'm just so happy to see you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
I mean,
Oh,
the energy shows because your characters and the way you portray them together, it's just so amazing. I want to know, were you familiar with the source material, the novel, before you had this project, and how did it come to you? Both.
yeah. So I did start reading the book, and then the time between the getting the part and filming was really short. I'm like the world's slowest reader, so I didn't get to read the whole book beforehand, but I did read it after. But like it's an amazing book, and also Joe Spain, who adapted it into the series, is like incredibly talented. So we were very fortunate to have that material. But I know you did because you were like raving about the book when
Yeah.
we were shooting.
Yeah, I read the scripts first, obviously, and then got a role. I think I didn't want to get attached to a book and then not get a role. That would be
Yeah.
pretty depressing. So yeah, so when I got cast, I read the book. And it was a bit tricky because obviously I had an idea of how the character was in the script, and obviously in the book it was a bit different. Like obviously same themes and same characters, but there were bits where I was thinking if I keep reading, there's going to be like an overlap of ideas, and
Yeah.
I didn't know whether to keep going, and I ended up reading the whole book, and it just gave me insights and little like eggs that I needed throughout that helped me form the character and stuff. So yeah, I definitely read the book. Yeah.
How did you get to create this chemistry, which we see on screen? Like, did you work together? How was it like the process?
So we had 2 days of chemistry reads. So I went to London. I read with four different boys, and there were four girls. And then we went to Manchester and read with another four boys with the same girls. And myself and Rory were the very last combination. So everyone read with everyone, and we were the last combination. And I think we'd been doing the same scene for so long because it was the same scene we'd auditioned with. Like it becomes when you do it for that long, it becomes kind of a bit robotic. But I did it with Rory, and it was like I'd never done it before. Like it was really special.
Mm.
And Lucy, the amazing director, messaged me, and she wanted to know who I had chemistry with, and I was like, Rory, I have photo evidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Yeah,
how that
I
happened.
keep saying it came quite naturally. It felt right when we did that first read, and um, we didn't really have to do anything. It just kind of came to us, and we had a bit of time before filming. We were at the same, wait, no, were we at the same hotel?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we
Yeah, yeah,
were.
yeah.
Yeah, we had a bit of time to talk, and we
Yeah.
sent memes to each other, which was a great way of bonding before we
Gen
started.
Z people bond.
Absolutely, just
But we're really
unacceptable.
close friends, so like
Yeah,
it's been really nice. So
yeah.
yeah.
It definitely
That was
shows up.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Seriously. But how did you see Allison and Daniel? Because for me, I feel like Allison, we usually girls, we're kind of complex. We have a lot of rich inner lives, even at an earlier age than Dan. So I feel like the combination of those both characters created this beautiful story that we all followed and fell in love with. So how did you both approach them? Because I feel like Allison has such depth and darkness probably before, but Dan was also having this darkness, maybe despite his circumstances not being that dark. So I want to hear your perspectives, both of you.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
I found a lot of my character through the dialect. So we worked with an amazing dialect coach called Jamie. And he sent me these videos and of like we were just saying Human League, a video of them, an interview of them in the 80s in Sheffield. But he taught me how the Sheffield accent can change so much more than just your voice. Like it changes your posture, it changes how you hold yourself. So that really introduced me to Alison. And then also, obviously, Alison deals with some quite difficult and very real things. So I did some research on those topics as much as I could and kind of tried to do some research on the effects of that and how that would affect a person. but yeah, and we were so well supported, and like Lucy, the director, really helped us kind of find those special things that connected us to the older Dan and Alison.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate and rich in that sense. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was so interesting that Dan, what is so heartbreaking about this story is the fact that he doesn't understand what Alison is going through. As you said, she's got so many layers to her. She's got so many things that just she can't get out. So she can't talk about it. And and that is, as you said, kind of leads on to Dan's doubts and anxiety because he can't really get through to her. And I thought that was, especially when I'd read the script and stuff, that came across, and that was what drew me to it. Because, you know, Dan, he was an ordinary teenage guy in Sheffield. It was his first love, and to have this kind of girl who in the script it said you were like a wallflower girl?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was,
Yeah.
yeah, and Dan was supposed to be this like popular guy who obviously, you know, he wasn't that I think he was just quite grounded and cool. But then, yeah, I just thought it was, yeah, the fact that they just were so in love and they couldn't understand each other's, well, Dan couldn't understand Alison's personal life, is heartbreaking, and that's why it's so, you know, special when we get to Jim and Teresa's relationship in the future, and they can kind of navigate and figure out, you know, what went wrong.
If that doesn't sell the show, I don't know what will.
Well, there you go. Great question, though.
Thank you. Okay. When I see scenes of you guys interacting and it's music and the power of music and lyrics and poetry and all that, and they're so magical when I'm as a viewer watching them, isn't that magical acting them? Or are you just like goofing around and the props are there, cutting your inspiration? This is what I want to know.
Yeah. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, no, like, I mean, it was for me, I like can't dance and stuff. So like when the first scene was a slow motion dancing scene, that was a problem.
That was our very first scene, and it was like a week before we actually started filming. So me and Rory had like spent like an hour together, and they were like, "Okay, and dance."
And I was overthinking that. Like, I mean, it was the first time I've been introduced to the camera. Like, he was right here in my face, and I was like, literally, no, yeah. And this is what I was saying. It was just, if you just break the ice by goofing around a little, then you can like start to really get into it, and it came out really, really nice.
It was a really fun environment on set, so it was very easy.
And that was props to Lucy Gaffy, the director. She just made such a comfortable environment. All the producers from Subotica and Aquarius were there, and it was literally like there was no judgment. Like, you know, when people are like behind the monitor looking at what you're doing and it dancing, it can get a bit, you know, tense, but it was honestly so fine. So it was a really fun shoot. Yeah.
Okay, my final question is, did you meet Jim and Teresa to kind of see like how at least just to imagine how your character's future would be, or didn't you do that?
Yeah, so I think, especially for me and you as well, but especially for Alison, because she changes so much, that connection didn't need to be so strong, because obviously I wouldn't know what my future was like. But I think it was more important for Teresa to really delve into that context of her younger self. But I met Teresa for like 10 minutes when I had just started filming and she was finishing, when we were both in Dublin. But yeah, apart from that, it was quite separate, and like all of our trust was in Lucy helping us guide us through that.
Yeah, we had like literally like a day with Jim and Teresa. Like, I remember you had to go to the airport, we had to cut that short, and we were just kind of they were still filming in Ireland. It was literally their last day, and it was strange because I got to see Jim film one scene on set. I just came and sat with Lucy, and that was literally, I hadn't started filming yet. So it was like incredible to watch him kind of do his thing, and it just gave me such an insight into how he was playing the character, and I felt so kind of at ease that I feel like we hold ourselves in the same way anyway. So it was no, it was lovely, and he's such a nice guy, and they're so talented.
They
So
really, yeah,
it
they
was
did an amazing
really
job.
it was really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was a great interview and honestly a great TV series. I can't wait for the world to watch it. Thank you, Florence and Rory, so much for your time.
Thank you
So
so
nice to speak
much.
to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Goodbye.
Hi, everyone. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing director Lucy Gaffy on her new TV series Mixtape, which is a lovely romantic drama circling around music, but also about how these feelings lift us across decades. Lucy, I'm so happy to talk to you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for watching the show and sharing it with your listeners and your viewers. I can't wait for them to enjoy it as well.
Okay, what I want to know is, were you familiar with the source material before? Like, were you familiar with the novel and, like the fan base that it had before you embarked on this project?
I had heard of the novel, but I actually hadn't read it until the pilot materials were shared with me. And so I ordered it immediately and jumped and read it really quickly and loved it. And it had a really normal people sort of vibe. So if you had enjoyed that show,
Yeah.
I immediately saw how it could feel. But it also had this beautiful added component of the use of music to speak. To allow characters to articulate what perhaps they're a bit too frightened to say in of themselves, which I think is really common. I think we can be a bit cowardly in our own lives sometimes, and using songs to declare is such a great thing. I also think songs are the dialect of youth, and it's something that kind of lets the little bodies that we are when we're young people kind of sort of declare these huge feelings we have either about another person or the world in general, all that sort of thing. And then I think music is it's a real gateway to memory. So we have that other side of it when we meet our younger characters when they're older, and old songs trigger memories and we use as access points for how we sort of jump between time periods in our story.
Okay, this is why I wanted to ask you. Now you have the characters in their teens and then you have them as adults. How do you think it's different? In the beginning, they're using music to communicate, but when they're older, they're kind of suppressing probably their love for that stage of their lives. Kind of like what we do. We grow up and we feel like, ah, we grew out of this, like immense love we had for this band or this song or whatever. But there's this invisible thread. How did you
Mm.
connect it through creating the characters and their lives?
It was such a journey, but also such a joyous one. And I might just capture the story for a second too. So, Mixtape's about two 16-year-olds in Sheffield in Northern England, kind of Margaret Thatcher era, like if you liked Billy Elliot, that kind of sort of era, who fall in love and they make little mixtapes for each other, sharing different types of music, sharing the music that they're into, or sharing music that kind of communicates what they're trying to say. And then we re-meet these characters in their 40s, just as social media is beginning to take off. So what a lot of people did, when Facebook or Insta sort of started was look up an old love. And so we meet them in their 40s when they reconnect a little bit. And again, they're a little bit shy. So instead of writing straight away, our protagonist Dan sends his old love a song. And so begins this sort of communication through music back and forth. And the series itself jumps in time. So we're sort of, the mystery of it is why didn't they work when they were young? And because they feel like such a perfect sort of couple. And so we're kind of unpacking those things that happen or choices that we make in our lives that we either regret or come to contemplate, later in life. So how did we do it? Goodness, it was really embedded in the script. It was really embedded in the original text. But as a filmmaker, it had to be something that existed in a really lively way on screen. And as I said, I either used music or visual points to trigger us in falling back in memories. I never called them flashbacks because I wanted it to feel as if this other era was living simultaneously with the contemporary story. So it's not like we just see the kids when they're young and then we leave them in episode one. It's actually woven really carefully through the entire series. So it really is more about watching two relationships burgeon together, grow together, have complications together, and they really mirror each other through time. And music was a tremendous way that we could link these two eras and make the growing complexity of these two beautiful love stories uh, interchange and feel connected.
I noticed that there are many works recently that have been about, the love that kind of like surpasses decades. We had one day, we had Normal People. We had recently they're going to do a novel called Deep Cuts. It will star, I think, Saoirse Ronan and Austin Butler. And now we have Mixtape. Why do you think the world now needs more of these stories about, I think, rekindling your love or re-energizing yourself through all these stories that you kind of left along the way?
I think humans are naturally reflective creatures, and that for whatever period, for whatever reason, and we do bring ourselves to junctures where we want to unpack the journey that our life has taken. Was this what I intended for myself? Was this a dream I had for myself? Was there a time in my life when I actually felt my truer self? Has that perhaps gotten lost in the messy, noisy journey of life, whether that's work or parenthood or just kind of the noise of the everyday? And I do think there's an opportunity now, particularly perhaps people in their 40s, to pause because you sort of feel too young to be old, but too old to be young. And so we've got this really, really beautiful period now where people sort of say, is this the life journey I want to have? If it's not, I actually do have space and time to make new choices and create a life that embraces a new happiness. I'm not too old for that. And so I think perhaps it could be sitting in something like that. But if I'm honest, I actually think reflecting on one's life is not unique to now, but perhaps it's just the portals that we have in the way that we tell stories, particularly in episodic storytelling, where we're able to unpack that a bit more broadly, a bit more complexly, and have the audience go on that journey with us.
100%. Okay. So Jim and Teresa are already established actors that we know, but the casting of the young cast, and I talked to them, I talked to Rory and Florence, and they're just amazing. So I don't know how was your casting process for these two, because they were just mind-blowing for me.
I know they were such extraordinary discoveries and they were such a pleasure to work with, as indeed were Jim and Teresa. So, as is really common in our world, we had already cast our two adult leads. And so our great journey was finding two young performers anywhere in the UK or Ireland who would match the essence of their adult counterpart, be beautiful natural actors in of themselves, be able to manage the Sheffield accent, which is really specific, and then find two young people who had a natural chemistry, because the series would absolutely live or die about whether you believed that there was a destiny to these two people being together. So there was that sort of three-pronged thing we were looking for, and we saw so many extraordinary actors in the UK and Ireland for these roles. We saw over 600 young actors, some of whom were experienced, others who had never done a thing, and we just did huge cattle calls and people were just sending little videos that they'd made in their bedrooms. It was completely adorable. And Rory was the second tape that we had seen, and Rory didn't have a huge amount of experience, and whereas Florence Flo, who is on Bridgerton and had an enormous amount of experience, she was one of the very last. I think she was like 597 or something like that that we went through, and we really did watch everyone's tapes really carefully and see them and see and sort of make sure we kind of could dialogue with them. And then at the end of that process, we gathered together a small grouping of boys and girls in London and in Manchester, and we sort of mixed everybody up and just sort of saw who engaged well with each other. And again, there was just so many wonderful actors. But I think once we saw Rory and Flo together, once they did a couple of scenes together, it was just chemistry city, and we were like, oh my goodness, these two are destined. So the whole team felt really quickly that they were the right couple for us to have.
Okay, so honestly, the most enjoyable scenes for you to shoot, was it discovering the young love with the young ones, or was it like the more toned down, kind of like the rekindling of the fire for the adults?
What a great question. I'm just a big film dork and I just love being on set. I really just, there's no part of being on set that I don't love. There's no scene that I don't love. I can have different um different days that are preferable, but like I think working with both couples uh was extraordinary for me as a director because they were quite different in their energies. There's something really delicious about young people coming together and the nervousness and the terror, of all of those things and the anticipation and the hope. And then there's something wildly different about two mature, deeply experienced actors working together, more complex scenes, where a lot of what you're working with is what they are unable to say and what they are unable to declare because of years of secrets or regret. And there's a different burden and there's a different acting process generally actually in those scenes that are heavy with the unsaid. And so for me as a director, it was an extraordinary experience to sort of have a pendulum swing between these two wildly different romantic relationships and how we could make manifest those two spaces on screen, make it feel balanced, make it feel connected, and ultimately make it a really satisfying audience experience.
Were there any references that you shared with the cast? Like, okay, just watch this or put yourself in the mood of this. Any songs, any movies, anything to just prep, or you just put them in out there and let them loose?
Oh no, I am a prep prince, prep queen. Um,
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So all the leads I created different Spotify lists for them about what songs that their character and which we shared. So then they added things to it and we kind of that was a really amazing conversation pre-production and something to bring into the audition spaces. Oh, where we thought Daniel would be young Dan and older Dan really, because older Dan is still living in Sheffield when we found him. He's sort of trapped in an arrested development. He's never left home, sort of, I think, hoping that Alison would return. And so he's really Northern pride, really into the Northern sound, both of the 80s and into the sort of, that more electronic sound, and then moving into the band, that sort of heavier sound as we move into the 90s and beyond. Whereas Alison, from the beginning, so we always said that Dan was navel gazing and that Alison was stargazing. So young Alison, is really interested in more of a Lou Reed, Velvet Underground. Like she's always looking abroad. She's looking away from the darkness of these Thatcher years that are happening in the UK. Everything's closing down. It's very dire. The weather's dreadful. She's looking to the US or Australia or anywhere to get away from where she is. So when she's young, that's the kind of music she's sharing with Dan. And when she's older, she starts sharing different things with him, mainly Australian music, kind of just making it about world. Then cinematically, we were really inspired by so many things. Obviously, I love shooting in real spaces. I love shooting on location. And so I was very inspired by so many of those beautiful British dramas that were actually shot in the North, shot in space. And then visually, my cinematographer, Martin Dean, and we still wanted the work to be really beautiful because I think you can be in a living space, but find beauty within any socioeconomic area or space, because that is the lived beauty that people have there. So we were inspired by lots of different cinema, Andrea Arnold and Fish Tank and all of these great works that still exist in these spaces, but heighten a sense of cinema. Because personally, whether I would step on this, be standing on the steps of Cannes and it's a film, or if it's a streaming program, I still bring in my practice as a director a desire for cinema, a desire for beauty, the use of visual language and sound and performance to marry together to make a really whole experience for the audience. So all of those things had to come together. So it really was a work that we drew on so many things. But then just broadly, we would just sit together and speak about our lived experience with love and with people and our dreams for ourselves. So as much as we looked outwards for influence, we did look internally as well to really ground the work in a lived, truthful experience of what it is to be a messy human, really.
Wow, just beautifully said, really. Okay. So what I want to ask you is, which was the scene where you were shooting and probably you kind of like stopped mid-track and you were like, wow, what am I witnessing? Was there a scene that kind of like impacted you like that? I would like to know.
So many, but one particularly jumps out, and you might not be up to it yet in the series. We were shooting in this beautiful old school in Dublin, which is where we shot, and it was falling apart, but in the best way for me. I just thought it was so gorgeous. And my Martin, my DOP, and I had decided to do this really significant scene, which is where the two young kids say, I love you for the first time. Our young Alison has already experienced some trauma up at this point, but she's not yet ready to tell Dan. So she's carrying a really heavy burden in this scene, and Dan's confused because he can tell that she's lying or she's withholding. But he basically declares in the scene, you don't need to tell me anything until you're ready. I love you. And it's such a gesture of grace and to just say, I'm present for you. Well, we had decided to do the scene in one certain section of the film, and, high cinema, I'd set up massive tracks and we were going to move with them and everything. And we shot enough different scene in the morning, and Martin and I were walking back to where we were having lunch in the afternoon, and we cut through the back of this area of this school in a section we'd never seen before. And it was a side field that, because there had been some rain the few days before, was now covered in flowers. And it had never been there before. It had never been on that location on any of our recce's. And the school's got this kind of broken down blue paint in the background with this field of flowers. And even though we'd spent 2 hours setting this other area up, we literally looked at each other and without even speaking, we just knew we're like, okay, well, we're going to have to do it here because it's the most beautiful thing we've ever seen. And we redesigned the entire scene. We still only had 45 minutes to do the whole thing now because we'd used this time. So we just did it handheld, really loosely, really in hand, really gentle, and in fact in a really human way, that we just stayed really present with our actors, with our young performers doing this really delicate scene. So this really delicate scene in this field of flowers next to this, you know, brutalist kind of building spoke to so much of the collision of our worlds. I would like to think that I planned it that way, but I did not. We just stayed very present in the beauty that we found. And I remember seeing that scene and seeing my young actors. And as I said, Rory's never done too much and Flo's done a lot, but they were so deeply connected in that moment. I was standing there with my beautiful producer, Polly, from Australia, and we looked at each other and we just knew that the show was there, that we had a show. And sometimes in the white noise of shoot, you're not sure. But that day we really did. And I love that scene.
You definitely captured magic in this show, and can't wait for the world to see it and for me to talk further about it. Lucy, thank you so much for talking to me.
Not at
This was a
all.
great conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad, and I'm so glad you enjoyed it, and I hope your listeners do as well.
Definitely. I'm sure everyone who just seeks love and wants to think about love and wants to think about memories and music will definitely enjoy this show.